I will turn over to the member for some opening statements, and then we'll be happy to take your questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being here today. I'm joined by Representative Jesse Johnson from the 30th District and Vice Chair of our Public Safety Committee. As you know, yesterday at 5 o'clock was our deadline for getting House bills out of the House. You know, coming into this session, I remember back in December and early January when we were doing practice sessions, and it was taking an hour and a half to 2 hours just to get legislators signed in and ready to do action. And so, you know, there was concern about how much we'd be able to get done in a session that was remote. And I think we exceeded expectations. You know, we were able to get out the Working Families Tax Credit, the Fair Start for Kids, a number of police reform bills, the low carbon fuel standard. We passed a number of bills to help our struggling business community. It was, I think, a good session, and I think we're very proud of the accomplishments that we were able to make. And before I turn it over to Senator Billig, I do want to brag just a little bit. As you probably saw yesterday, that we were again ranked #1 by U.S. News and World Report as the best state in the nation, and that's something that we should be very proud of. Andy?
Great, thank you, Representative Sullivan. So I'm Andy Billig, state senator from the 3rd Legislative District in Spokane and the Senate Majority Leader, and joined today by Senator Emily Randall, who's our Majority Whip, and also the chair of the Senate Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee. And yeah, with cutoff yesterday, it was also a time of reflection, and you know, similar to what Representative Sullivan said, I was thinking back, we had 3 priorities as we came into this hybrid session, mostly remote session with really a lot of uncertainty. And we wanted it to be safe for members and for the, for legislators and for the staff, and for the public. We wanted to make sure that we had public access and transparency. And we wanted to make sure that it was productive and efficient and effective for the people of Washington State. And at least halfway through session, through cutoff yesterday, we've been able to accomplish all 3 of those goals. So really proud of our team and appreciative of all the hard work of the legislative technical staff and all of the staff that have made that possible, and of course our members. In terms of being productive and effective, similar, just really proud of what we were able to pass: the historic child care and early learning bill, data privacy, a big unemployment insurance bill to help small businesses in our state, bills on equity and education and healthcare, police accountability, environmental justice, criminal justice reform, and a lot more. And while it feels good to get all of that done, oh, and I almost forgot right at the end, a big farm worker overtime bill, which would really be historic legislation in the country if we can get that the rest of the way through the system. So while we feel really good about that, our work is not done, and we're looking ahead to the second half of session, opposite house, and obviously working on the budget. So feel good about where we are and where we're headed. I'm glad to take questions.
Great. And first we'll go to Rachel Laporte with the Associated Press. Rachel.
Hi, for Representative Sullivan, now that the Senate has passed capital gains, do you have a sense on how soon the Finance Committee would hold a hearing on that? And do you agree with the Senate's decision to remove the emergency clause?
So our Finance Committee will likely take up that bill next week with a public hearing. Then we'll go from there. We were happy to see the Senate pass capital gains. And so, the bill in its current form is one that I think that we can pass, and look forward to getting it to the governor's desk.
Rachel, do you have a follow-up?
And I guess for the senators, if that emergency clause is added back on in the House, ultimately, do you think that would affect the ability for you guys to move it out of your chamber again?
I think we'll look at that. If it happens, we'll consider that and caucus on it and see, what the feeling was. But the right mix for the policy for the Senate was to be able to move it forward in the form it did, and we were glad. I mean, it allows us to move forward on tax fairness and really over the 10 years I've been here, and I think you know my policy area, I don't get to work as much on policy as the majority leader, but my lead policy area has been early learning and childcare because it is so transformative for children and families and supports employers. And that capital gains bill means that we can pass that very historic policy.
Next, we'll go to Austin Jenkins with the Northwest News Network. Austin, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. A lot of the discussion or debate on the floor of the Senate from Republicans had to do with, their assertion that this is a form of an income tax. But setting that aside for a moment, if it is challenged in court, I know that there's some interest on the part of some Democrats in having the court revisit the question of whether a graduated income tax is constitutional or not constitutional. I'd like to just hear the leaders speak a little bit to that idea of assuming this passes, assuming it's signed into law, what the opportunity is for the court to revisit that, I guess, decades-long point of view right now on graduated taxes.
Pat, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously the focus right now is on capital gains, and we're very certain, from the people who we consult with, that it is an excise tax. So, we know that it's likely to go to the courts, and we'll see how they deal with it. On the broader discussion of an income tax, that the tax reform work group has been meeting all last year. Will continue to meet. To look at a variety of options on how we can reform our system to make sure that, those that are struggling, those that shouldn't have to pay a higher percentage of their tax are actually paying their fair share, and those that can afford to pay more are paying more. And so, I just assume that we'll continue to work on that effort during this interim.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just because somebody says something over and over and over again doesn't make it true. We certainly heard a lot about that, but it's not up to me or a Republican senator or anybody else to make that determination. If somebody wants to challenge it in court, then it'll be up to the court to decide. And if it's not challenged in court, then it'll move forward in its current form. And I think that, again, we were focused on passing the bill so that we could invest in children and families and make this step in terms of accessibility and affordability for childcare at a level that's never been seen before in our state.
Austin, do you have a follow?
I guess maybe Senator Billig, just in follow up to that, longer term or bigger picture though, do you hope that that if it was challenged, this would give the court a chance to revisit that 33 or 34 decision?
No, I haven't looked that far ahead. For me, this bill was about tax fairness and trying to write our upside down tax code and investing in children and families through childcare accessibility and affordability. That's why I voted for this bill.
Great. Next, we'll go to Hannah Scott with Cairo Radio. Hannah.
Hello. I would like to ask, and I think I saw Representative Johnson on the call, if not anyone who can speak to it, just for a takeaway on where we stand with the police accountability bills that have made their way through.
Oh, thank you for the question, Hannah. I'm really proud of our side and really both chambers for the work that has been happening since last summer, really, with community and law enforcement and families at the center of the work. And we, on the House side, we passed a number of bills, obviously related to police reform and accountability. We passed House Bill 1310 on use of force, which is going to implement a stronger use of force statute and also narrow the focus of deadly force. We passed House Bill 1054 on tactics to make sure that we set a baseline standard for police tactics that can be used and banning harmful tactics like chokeholds and no-knock warrants and certain military equipment, and independent investigations, which obviously had a really robust stakeholdering process to establish an Office of Independent Investigations for deadly force. And then also we have duty to intervene coming over from the Senate. We have decertification coming over from the Senate. We passed impeachment disclosures and data collection. So I think the full package of bills together will be a constellation of different efforts to make sure we have accountability in the system. And I'm just proud of the work that went into it. And also that each bill was really grassroots led and led with the voice of community at the center of the work. So again, I think this was a groundbreaking year for police reform and accountability bills.
Anna, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Can someone speak to the status of the bill banning high-capacity magazines?
Yeah, since that was a Senate bill, I can talk to that. So that's a bill that we had, it got to rules, and we certainly talked about it as a caucus. But, you know, when you get down to the last couple of days before cutoff on some of the big bills, you make, you know, that's a bill that would have taken, you know, half a day or a whole day. And how many other bills do you want to, you know, put aside in order to do that? And, you know, it's obviously a bill that's close on the votes, and it's also about floor management. I think when we look overall at what we've done in, you know, public safety, police accountability, the open carry bill from Senator Cooter that we passed, I think it's a really, really significant step forward. And just one other thing on, you know, Representative Johnson has been such a leader on police accountability legislation, and really grateful for his leadership. And in fact, you may have seen that our 5 o'clock bill in the Senate, a little bit unusual, but we passed a House bill related to police accountability, House Bill 1088 on impeachment disclosures from Representative Lovick, and to really highlight that this is a priority, and that, you know, some of these bills are bipartisan, and that was a bipartisan police accountability bill. And again, you know, so much of the work we do and that we've done this year has been bipartisan, but we wanted to highlight that important House bill as our final bill before cutoff.
Next, we'll go to Doug Nidvornik from Spokane Public Radio. Doug, go ahead.
Thank you. So yesterday, the House approved a forest health / forest resiliency / wildfire prevention bill, unanimous vote, but there's still one issue that's still not clarified, and that is, how do you pay for $125 million for every biennium? So Senator Billig or Senator Randall, do you have any idea yet whether that money would just come straight from the general fund, or whether there is a funding mechanism or mechanisms that have been identified for that?
Hi, Doug. Glad to see you on here. Always glad to have Spokane media on the call. So thanks for joining us. I may send that over to Pat just because it's a House bill, and so we have spent less time on that than, and it wouldn't necessarily initially be in the Senate budget because it was a House bill. So is that okay, Representative Sullivan?
Oh, absolutely. And Representative Springer has been our lead on this issue, and working with the Department of Natural Resources. You know, as you suggested, we don't have a revenue source specifically tied to that bill, but it will be part of our budget process. And so I do know that Representative Springer continues to look for a funding source that would long-term solve the problem. But we passed the bill because of the policy that was involved. You know, we'll be looking at our budget to make sure that we're funding those things that need to be funded.
Yeah, and I just want to add that it's not that we won't have forest health in the Senate budget. This is an area that's obviously important to the whole state. And Senator Rolfes, who's our budget chair, is a particular, you know, one of the legislative leaders in this area. So I am confident that we are going to have robust budget provision in the Senate budget, and sounds like in the House budget as well, on forest health.
Doug, you have a follow?
Yeah, there's one other bill I'm keeping an eye on. That's Representative Riccelli's bill regarding regional health districts. It passed through the House, but it was pretty much party line with a lot of people complaining that, hey, this sounds like it's a Spokane sort of beef that is looking for some sort of solution. So do you think, Senator Billig, that bill is going to get much traction in the state Senate?
Oh, I think it'll definitely get consideration. I don't think it's just a Spokane issue. I think Pierce County has been dealing with this. I think it's something that came from the governor's office, actually. Representative Riccelli, I think, was glad to be the prime sponsor, but if I remember correctly, it either was governor request or governor suggested. And so I think that it's definitely got statewide importance. I'm sure it'll get consideration.
And I just want to give credit to Representative Riccelli, who worked really hard on that bill. It's gone through some significant changes already. And as we passed it off the floor, we acknowledged the fact that, work would have to continue on that bill before it get to the governor's desk. So, I think that it's a bill that's something we should get done this year. And, I think in the end, we'll be able to get something hopefully over to the governor's desk.
Yeah, and Senator Randall is on our healthcare, one of our healthcare leaders. So I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add on that.
Yeah, I will say, we just had our first healthcare committee hearing post cutoff, and I know we have a full calendar, but I'm looking forward to how that hearing goes on the Senate side so that we can really weigh the issue, and hear testimony and take community input on the policy before, we talk about whether or not it's going to move forward.
Thank you.
Next, we will go to Sara Gentzler with McClatchy. Sarah, go ahead.
Thanks, Aaron. The form in which the Working Families Tax Exemption Bill passed out of the House yesterday makes it so the exemption no longer needs to be authorized in the budget for it to be available to taxpayers. So my first question for Senator Billig is the Senate committed to keeping it that way?
So we were focused on the Senate cutoff yesterday, so I can't say that I looked at the detail. I did see that bill passed and was glad to see it. I've been a supporter of the Working Families Tax Credit for a long time. We handled it in a different way. Part of the capital gains proposal is for the tax fairness account, and specifically called out in that bill is funding for the Working Families Tax Credit through the Tax Fairness Fund. I think the House bill is more comprehensive than that. So it will get lots of consideration in the Senate. Exactly what form it gets worked to or how it passes, I'm not sure at this point.
And that's also a discussion that'll happen as we move forward with our budget process. All tax exemptions are considered when we do our budgets. And so I assume that we'll be having conversations during that time frame as well.
Yeah. And typically the things that are passed the bills that are passed out of the House will be in the House budget. The bills that are passed out of the Senate will be in the Senate budget. Sometimes there are a little bit of exceptions, but, and then, those last few weeks of session are really about, marrying up the two budgets and negotiating and making sure that we can accomplish everything that we need to for the people of Washington.
Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
That answered my second question about the Working Families Tax Credit, but I do have a question for Representative Johnson about House Bill 1202, which was one of those 5 priority bills for families impacted by police violence. And I think it was the only one of the 5 to not make it past the cutoff. So a coalition member described that particular bill as the teeth of your House Bill 1310. Can you speak to how this development, the fact that that 1202 didn't pass, what that impact is on 1310, and why 1202 might not have made it past the cutoff?
Well, thank you for the question. First, I got to give a lot of credit to the sponsor of that bill. She worked really hard with the stakeholders the past few months, and unfortunately, we had a lot of time constraints this year and capacity constraints, and we had a number of crucial police bills, and we got them passed, and I think we're going to have a robust system of reform and accountability. I will say for 1310, we now have a new use of force standard that goes farther than the national Graham v. Connor standard. So this is going to sow a lot more trust into the system, because no matter what jurisdiction you go to, there'll be the same use of force standard across the state. The second piece of that bill was making sure that officers are held liable, and 1202 was part of the enforcement mechanism for that. But we will have the DCERT bill So if officers violate the use of force standard, they could be decertified and investigated administratively as well. And so I think in the future, we're going to work on that bill, and I think we'll see it come back. But there's a lot of labor implications. And, I will say that I think that we have a really strong system with the use of force standard in place that will only get better. And we have more work to do in the future on that. But unfortunately, we just weren't able to get it moving this year, but I think we'll come back to it in another session.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll go to Jerry Cornfield with the Everett Herald. Jerry.
I wanted to ask about a priority bill in the Senate and for the governor and the insurance commissioner, Senate Bill 5010, the credit score. Has leadership of the two caucuses talked about making that necessary to implement the budget and to keep it alive, or is it dead for the session?
The rules about the necessary to implement the budget or impacting state revenue, which are the two exceptions to the cutoff revenue, are fairly strict. So it's not like there's a magic wand. So that bill is a policy bill. So I do not expect that bill would move forward.
And I agree. It would not be subject to either those bills that are exempt from the cutoff or necessarily to implement the budget. We got through as much work as we could this year, and I think that you'll see that bill again in the future.
Jerry, have a follow?
As we've been talking, the Congress or the U.S. House has passed the federal COVID package that is about to send you guys more money than you can possibly spend this year or next. Somewhere between $5 and $7 billion will come to state government, in addition to money that will come to schools and cities and counties. So what's the plan? Will you create a separate account in the budget? Are you already looking at a calendar for special session? How does the state legislature, with so little time left in the session, deal with all this money from the federal government?
Well, I think, Jerry, you'll see that our budgets may be out a little later than are traditionally out, in part to take a look at the federal stimulus money, and in part to look at the March forecast, which will be out next week. As far as the COVID relief money, it is a significant amount of money. And our staff, our nonpartisan staff, will be looking at, the important thing is getting the guidelines so we know how those funds can be used and how they're not allowed to be used. And so, as quickly as those guidelines come in, it will help us through that budget process. In some cases, I think that we'll be able to expend those dollars earlier where those guidelines are clear. In other areas, it may, take a little longer to get those funds out. But that's all wrapped up in the budget process that we're working through right now. But we're excited. I mean, that's money that will help, our state's unemployed. It will help those that are behind on their rent. It will help those businesses that are really struggling. That money is critical to really helping those that are really struggling through this pandemic. And we're excited that the Congress got that work done, and excited the work that President Biden put into getting it through.
Yeah, and I just want to build on what Representative Sullivan said about the great ways that we already know we'll be able to invest some of those federal dollars, like expanding on Senator Wilson's Child Care and Early Learning Bill 5237 to earlier than we thought be able to cover childcare for college students who have been left out and who have been struggling to be working parents and students at the same time. So, these dollars are going to help us really make an impact on families in Washington.
All right, thank you. Next, we will go to Laurel Demkovich with the Spokesman Review. Laurel.
Thanks, Aaron. Just a quick follow-up on something you just said, Representative Sullivan. With the budget coming out slightly later, as you said, do you imagine that you'll be able to get everything done by the end of the session, or is there a chance that you'll have to call yourself into a special session to kind of deal with this federal money later?
Yeah, and I guess it's one step at a time. Our plan is to get done on time and have a budget that is agreed to at the governor's desk. And that's the that's the timeline that we will move forward with. You know, even though it's out a little bit later, you know, we'll get to work negotiating a final budget right away. And if there's additional work that has to be done after we adjourn in order to deal with federal dollars, then we'll have that conversation then about how we would make that happen.
Yeah, and you know, we obviously didn't know exactly what was going to happen with federal funds, but we did know that it would be a crunch at the end to get the budgets done, especially because we're in a remote setting. So we actually adjusted the cutoff calendar this year differently than past long sessions to add more time at the end of the calendar so that we have more time to negotiate. So that's one thing that'll help. The other thing that will help is we just went through with the federal support that we got early in session. We went through a process where the House and Senate worked together. We worked with our Republican counterparts to get input, and kind of we have a model of how to work together to get one-time funding out to people that are suffering. And that's the thing. I just, you know, it's been said a couple times, but we are in a crisis, and we have small businesses and families and you know, tenants and landlords who are in crisis and need support. So not only do we want to get it done because we always want to get done by sine die, but also we want to help people that need support throughout Washington State.
Laurel, do you have a follow?
Yes, just to follow up on, I believe, Doug's question on the wildfire bill. I know you mentioned you don't know exactly yet where that funding might come from, but do you have any sense of if it'll end up being a significant investment like the bill calls for? I think it's around $125 million per biennium. And if so, why is this the year that there is this significant funding for forest health?
You know, I think it's a priority. I mean, it's always been a priority. We've done the best that we can. Even in our last budget, when we weren't able to get a revenue source passed, we did invest significant money in DNR. And, you know, we'll continue to do that. The question is long term. I know that the Commissioner of Public Lands would like to get a dedicated source so that there is predictability around how much money she can count on for the programs and services that she believes she needs in order to do the work she has to do. But you know, again, that'll be wrapped up in our budget process as we move forward. And I'd suggest, you know, you may want to talk to Representative Springer about the work that he's doing and trying to identify that revenue source.
Yeah, just, you know, one of the things that's happened over the last few, not particularly this year, but over the last few years, is really a recognition of forest health is not just for the sake of forest health, that these wildfires have such a dramatic impact, negative impact on people's health. I mean, there's obviously the immediate impact of the fires, which are catastrophic, but also the impact from smoke of health, the impact on, you know, restaurants and events. And it just is such a bigger impact now that the wildfires are getting progressively worse, it seems, every year, or at least every couple of years. So there's even a broader coalition. And in our caucus, Senator Rolfes, Senator Vanderweg, and others have really been leaders in this area to help make progress. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it's higher on the priority list.
Great, we got time for one more, and we will go to Christine Pay with King 5. Christine, go ahead.
Hi there, everyone. This question is really for anyone in the room. There are some Republican lawmakers who are pushing for the next phase of reopening and entering phase 3, namely 50% capacity for businesses. So my question is, what are your thoughts on this? And is Washington indeed ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all want to get back to normal as fast as possible. We all want businesses to be open. We all want to be able to go enjoy restaurants, and we want to do that safely. And you know, people in Washington State have done a great job. I think we were the third best state in terms of COVID health, in terms of safety throughout this, and health throughout this pandemic. So that's a great testament to the governor's work, but also the sacrifices and hard work of the people throughout the state. But with that said, there's a balance, and I think everybody wants things to be more open. And with the case numbers and hospitalizations being lower, hopefully we're not far from a next step in progress.
Yeah, just echoing what Senator Billig said, you know, we all want to be there. We want our restaurants open. We want to, you know, be able to go about life in a normal way. And we'll continue to work with the governor as we move forward, as we have in the past.
Yeah, and I'll just add that today we had a really great briefing in Senate Health and Long-Term Care on vaccine distribution. And, you know, our capacity is increasing, our supply is increasing, and it will continue to increase so that we can help our businesses, our schools, our communities continue to move about safely while maintaining the health of our neighbors, particularly those who are most at risk.
Thank you.
You have a follow-up?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I will turn back over to the members for some closing remarks.
Senator Randall, you want to?
Sure. I just want to say how excited and proud I am at the work we've been able to accomplish already at this point in session. You know, Rep. Sullivan started this conversation with how we thought, you know, our expectations might be low for how many bills we'd be able to pass. And we've successfully passed incredible policy out of both chambers by this point in session. And we've also seen record testimony and signups from folks in committee using their voices to advocate throughout this process. So we've been able to continue engaging the public and pass really important policies to help folks now in the pandemic, but also continuing to build a healthier, safer Washington for all of us. So I'm really excited about what the second half of the session will bring and how we'll continue to be able to put the people of Washington first.
I guess I could go ahead and just add to that. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is we're looking at how to do things differently, not the same as in the past. And I know these are challenging times for everyone, but our caucus on this side, and I know the Senate as well, we prioritize racial equity in every policy we've made and decision we've made. We've looked at the racial equity impact. And I think that's, you're seeing it in the bills that are being passed are just incredible bills that are going to help folks across the state of Washington recover from this pandemic, and communities and businesses recover, and families. And so I'm just really proud of the work that we're doing and really looking deep at our equity impact in every single policy.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you. Bye.